Microfinance Bank, and also the chairperson for the HBL's Sustainability Forum. From the Policy Institute and from the policy angle, we have Mr. Qasim Ali Shah, who is the Deputy Executive Director for the Sustainable Policy Development Institute, Islamabad, SPDI. He's flown in for this particular session from Islamabad. Thank you, Qasim Saab. Thank you so much. And lastly, we have Mr. Martin Dawson, Acting Deputy High Commissioner for the United Kingdom in Pakistan. He brings in an international perspective and a government level perspective, both locally and internationally. So with that, we will start our session. To the panel, why be sustainable? What is this sudden urge to be sustainable? How it has seeped into our narrative? And let me start with Qasim. Qasim, why this sudden urge? Everyone seems to be talking about sustainability. Is it a fashionable word, or is it, I mean, humanity was perfectly all right. And suddenly, in the last 30 odd years, you suddenly hear this terminology come up. Why this word? Why now?
Thank you so much, Ali. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today in this session. Recently, I was visiting a school in Wakent, and I was talking to secondary and lower secondary students there. And we were discussing this very much issue, what is the sustainable development, what is sustainability? And I asked them, when we talk of sustainability, why we talk only about people and planet? And the students actually started discussing about the people first, and then the planet, and then they were trying to look at the outcome. What is the ultimate end to it? And then somebody in the cohort said that perhaps it's the returns. Some students actually noted positively, but there were many who actually didn't like this idea, and they said that, no, this is selfish. There was one voice from one corner. Again, somebody added, no, this is basically, we need empathy there. There were people who talked in the class about the ethics. And then there was another voice which said, no, perhaps we need to talk more about the equity here. And we need to distribute whatever the returns are. And that makes it sustainable. And I said, what is the ultimate end then? And somebody in the class said that it's the happiness. If everybody is happy, perhaps the process is sustainable. And linking this whole thing with happiness, earlier I thought, when I heard this return, that perhaps we are going back to the Harvard Business School where they talk of the three bottom line approach. Then when the students actually started discussing about the happiness and this, I said perhaps we are talking about the prosperity, which is a shared vision. And it reminded me of the Sustainable Development Goals. It rests on 5 Ps, basically. And the first 3 Ps are people, planet, and prosperity. The next 2 Ps are basically, one is the peace, which is the ultimate objective, and partnership is the means through which we can achieve the sustainability, with which we can achieve the sustainable development. And with this ongoing process, perhaps when, and I'm quoting this example and sharing here because in that room, there were multiple generations sitting there. There was myself, there was faculty, there was kids from the different grades. And we talk of sustainability, and we have reached to a conclusion that perhaps happiness is something which is required. And for that, we need an empathetic society. We need to bring in equity into discussion, and whatever the development is happening, it should be ethically sound. Thank you.
That's encouraging, and I picked up this theme from your answer, that it's youngsters who are sitting out there, they were talking about it. So I guess, Martin, is it a groundswell? Is it like a bottom-up approach that people are forcing the hands of governments, policymakers, youngsters, or is it a top-down approach? What's in your experience? How are you experiencing it? Is it a top-down or a bottom-up desire for sustainability as peace and prosperity of the 5 Ps that Qasim just mentioned?
I think Well, can I also just answer your first question, if I may, because I think that's an important one, and then I'll answer your second one to me. You were talking about this, why is it all happening, this drive on sustainability. I'd actually like to challenge that. I don't think it's new, and as part of my research, and obviously being a diplomat, who we all know very well here in Pakistan, the parent company of Dove soaps, Axe body spray in 2008 and 2018. And moreover, by creating more opportunities for women, Unilever has become the preferred consumer for goods and employers for graduate students in 50 countries. So I just want to challenge you. We've been talking about this a long time, and for some of me, let's stop talking and do, let's turn into action. But your point is well taken. I do, coming from the development background, the importance we place on youth and bringing youth into the dialogue is very key, and I think it's what's marked my colleague, what he was saying. That's where some of the ground force is coming down. And I do agree, it's also coming down, top down, but for me, it's where those two then meet and where we need to take some action, and that's what I don't see.
Maya, you represent the corporate side of the equation, and I think we were just talking about that the thing is, how do you integrate impact and sustainability in business, life, and investment? But before I go on, we've always seen this word sustainability. Suddenly we start seeing this word impact and sustainability. Is this a wordplay, or is this a real change of thinking? What's this impact and sustainability? Does it transcend the old definition?
I think it's important to measure, to always have a measure as well, that, where are you going from and where are you going to?
Okay.
So in terms of if there is a practice that you are doing which is sustainable, and it is part of your sustainability journey, then it's always important to measure the impact. So if you, for example, are working towards financial inclusion, which is also very much a part of sustainability, and you have invested in, say, technology, and that technology has fueled the financial inclusion, then that is your impact, right? If you are working towards bringing more women into the workforce, the last 20 years, this is a more sort of organizational example, but at HBL, when the privatization happened in 2004, the percentage of women was at 2.6%. Today we've crossed over 23%. So this 20-year journey has been one where, we have driven impact through our practices, which is very much a part of our sustainability. So those are the kind of things where you can measure your impact. If you look at your philanthropic giving, right? And then again, we give 1.5%, this is at HBL, gives 1.5% of our bottom line profit, but we don't just give the money away. We measure the impact. That if we've been able to, and we have, through the last 10 years, through our giving, we've impacted 10 million lives in education and health programs across Pakistan.
But a corporate entity exists for, at the end of the day, for shareholders, for shareholders. You talk about profit and loss at the end of the day. When you integrate some of these, I hear that you're saying that you integrate some of the impact and sustainability actions into your business practices. Does it not mean that you let go of certain business opportunities? Does it not mean that there's a certain pinch on your bottom line?
Absolutely.
And how do you then justify your actions to your shareholders who suddenly say, hey, where's my return on investment? Where's my dividend? Where's that coming in?
I think, it is incumbent upon the shareholders to have that understanding and to have that respect for the people, for the planet and the environment as well, and the world at large. And because of course it's as important as putting your money where your mouth is. And there are certain things that you have to do. So for example, since 2020, we were the only ones to publicly state that we would not be doing any coal financing. As the largest lender in the market, the fact is that when you've said that you will not allow any new coal to enter your portfolio, that is very much a decision that impacts your bottom line.
All right, so good. Qasim, at the end of the day, you need to establish policy guardrails. you need to drive the thinking of corporate entities, individuals, NPOs who are in this field to really, what is being done in Pakistan that you're privy to or you're leading, which ensure that the country is moving in the right direction of, as you said, integrating impact and sustainability into the various aspects?
I will love to quote the example of Vision 2025 Pakistan here.
Yeah.
That was the one of the document which came before the SDGs was launched globally. But it used some of the principles which were agreed upon during the SDGs discussions, SDGs framing discussions. So if we use these 5 Ps which I have mentioned earlier in my talk as a building blocks, the resulting policies, plans, and the pathways for implementation would be more equitable, it would be just, it will be taking all the stakeholders on board from the day one. And that is something which we need. Like recently, one of my colleagues only yesterday have written in Dawn, in one of the op-ed, that perhaps Udaan Pakistan is one of the programs which is very ambitious, which might have some policy subscriptions there, but how actually we're going to achieve it, the key performance indicators and the gaps around the capacity as well as the finances remain there, which haven't been answered. So it could be a good manifesto from the current government, but it's not going to serve the purpose which we really wanted to achieve out of this document. So those sort of policies are actually happening all over. If we look into the past 70 years, the Agenda 21, the National Conservation Strategy was launched back in 1992. And the government of Pakistan actually committed that definitely they're going to make efforts to bring in sustainability element in all the policies and practices. That unfortunately hasn't happened. And we need to look into some of the policies, like the recent policy that is the installation of the solar tube wells. That might be actually helping the farmers, but how farmers are using it in all over the provinces, how they are extracting the water from the aquifer, and how it would result into a catastrophe end of the day, that these actually be to look at. So I suggest that yes, perhaps this is there, the understanding is there, but how to implement it, perhaps we need to come up with some plans how we are making it really a key point for our policy formulation.
So what you're saying is that there's no dearth of policy prescriptions, but it's, as someone, an ex-boss of mine used to say, we know the what and the why, but we do not have the how to do it. So how do we influence that, Martin? And also, how do we influence that? I mean, it translates from action into actions. That's question one, Martin, and I think from your perspective of a vantage point of having worked in different countries, that's one. But the second and part B of that question for me is, what I hear and what I read is happening coming out of the US. There seems to be a certain pushback from the government itself on certain impact and sustainable initiatives. DE&I is being pushed back. Some of the global agreements they're coming out of that, the Paris Agreement. So are we seeing a backlash on impact and sustainability? Or is it just localized to a particular country and a particular political outlook?
Okay, that's a nice one. I'll do the first one first. I think you asked me about the how. I think there's very much falls down to, countries like the UK and probably other donor countries and the international community to assist in how you make the what, when, turn it into the how. With introductions of regulatory frameworks, policies, what you name it, whatever's required there, and also examples of, I would say, best practice. I wouldn't say we get it always right, but maybe some examples, potential best practice. And obviously finance, I think that's quite key. And providing, grant funding that's in support of private sector funding, be that either public-private partnerships or whatever. So I think that's very much critical for that, the role that international community can play in that, and also from our side, the work that we've been doing on reforming the multilateral development banks, so assisting with their who are providing support to Pakistan as well, ADB, World Bank and those, and how they release more climate finance initiatives as we've done in the UK. Now, on your second point, that's very challenging. I think I would agree. I think there is some resistance there, and I know we're not naming specific areas, but I think has been and will be a general resistance. I think, sadly, I think it's a reflection of where we are globally. Very much not just in the sector of corporate business and sustainability, but I think just globally, everything is becoming far more polarized, which I think is a concern. Because a lot of the issues we're talking about affect everybody and are global. And I think the more that whichever parts of the globe become more polarized and focusing on themselves, and I would include the UK in that as well. We're not, I don't think anyone's immune from thinking about your own people first. But it does run a risk, a high risk, that it just becomes more polarized and things, again, the important thing that we're trying to address, again, will be lost. And for me, time is of the essence on this. So I agree with you, it's a risk, so we should address that as well.
I think what I sense is you're saying, given the polarization that's now seeping into various aspects of life across, a better thing would be to say, think local, act local, rather than saying the global aspect, because globally we're going different directions. And I think with that in mind, Maya, we always talk about what the government can do for us and how the government should come up with policy guardrails. Is it feasible or thinkable that the other way happens? Corporate entities such as your employer, HBL, the big footprint, they influence the government policy by their actions, and that this is what we need to do because you're also an investment channel. So can the influence go this way rather than coming again top? Is that possible?
Absolutely, because the thing is that when you, Pakistan went from being a agrarian economy to a service economy.
Yeah.
It didn't build a manufacturing base as it should have. And subsequently, the agrarian economy has also sort of been ignored.
Okay.
And what we as an institution have been doing along with others is sort of bringing back that agrarian economy front and center, because it is critically important. Going forward, where we are, geopolitically, it's always said that is an advantage for us. If that is not there anymore, we at least have the potential of being a food basin for the region.
Okay.
And I think we must look, and then that is a sustainable idea that looking forward, we have to retain our importance, not to mention that we have a growing population.
Yeah.
So if you even look locally at who we have to feed, we have to ensure food security.
Yeah.
So in that, agriculture becomes paramount importance. And absolutely, as Qasim Saab mentioned, we need to look at the practices to ensure that we are not using up all our water, because that's also an issue for the country, the water scarcity. And as the biggest lender today to the agriculture sector between HBL and the Microfinance Bank, we look at 360,000 farmers, about 110 billion in loans. So we've launched a value chain subsidiary called HBL Zarai, which works with the farmers in the farmlands, sort of right at their doorstep, by providing them with seed, with fertilizers, with farming equipment that can help increase their yield, improve their farming methods. There are agronomists who can advise them how to plant responsibly, how to take care of the soil, protect it, ensure it. So these are the kind of things that we can do as institutions. And I think when I look at it now, there are several institutions who are stepping forward and are choosing to focus on agriculture. And that is how the private sector can then influence the government as well.
Okay. You talked about food security, you talked about water scarcity, and that brings me, Qasim Saab, to an interesting observation that I read in a book, Pakistan, a Hard Country by Anatole Levin. And that's one of the most objective books I've read on Pakistan. And in that, he predicts that, God forbid, if Pakistan ever goes into a war again with our neighbor, it will be a water war. It will be a war because and for water. That's how critical this aspect is coming to. My question from you is, what are we doing on this aspect? Because we are a water scarce country. We have issues. I mean, we live in a city, Karachi, and we all are aware as to the challenges that we have around water. And that's just a very localized example. What policy initiatives are being taken on this to address this issue that you're aware of, or that or SDPI is leading?
Water is an interesting subject when it comes when it is discussed in Pakistan in meetings or sessions like this. There is one misconception around water which is very common to all Pakistanis, that Pakistan is a water scarce country. If we look into water flow in the rivers, it has never gone 110 million acre feet in any single year since 1970s. It has increased in certain years, but it has never gone down. In the last 30 years, what has happened, that the population has increased tremendously. And it has put a lot of pressure on our all resources, including water. And if you look into past 3 census reports, you will see that the population in 70s and 80s, per capita water availability was roughly around 3,500 liters per day per person. It has reduced to 1,000. And over the years, if the water flow in rivers haven't decreased, this means that the population has increased or some other factor is at play. So this is one thing which we need to address when it comes to water more specifically. Then the next question is about the sustainability. Yes, we need a judicious use of water. And that's why in my earlier comment, I referred that perhaps we are extracting the water at a pace which is not sustainable at all. We are eating away the resources available underground as well as on the ground. And for that matter, what my effort is basically how to educate the farmers to use water judiciously. Because 93% of the total water available in the country is utilized in the agriculture sector. 6% is which is used by the industry, and remaining is by the consumers itself. So this is a mix. And if we really wanted to change this mix, and within the agriculture sector, 50% of the water which is consumed for agriculture is lost. It never reaches to the farm level. So we need to improve the practices. And one thing where recently we were working with the Planning Commission, and we did this report for them, that is about the introduction of new technology in agriculture sector. And we thought that perhaps it's time for the government of Pakistan to think about the precision agriculture, how to introduce technologically advanced agriculture within Pakistan. And somebody there talked about the small farmers. Definitely. That's a big investment which is required in the agriculture sector. And there was agriculture transformation plan under which a lot of money was actually allocated by the government. And we thought at that point of time to suggest this to the government of Pakistan to make use of this plan, to fund this plan through precision agriculture. And that will not just improve the production for the farmers and increase their incomes, but also how to sustainably use the resources, whatever is available at the different levels.
Martin, your organization has actually renamed its, well, correct my knowledge, it's gone from the Foreign Office to the FCDO, Foreign and Commonwealth Development Organization. That change in name must be a very deliberate change. It's a development organization as well. Keeping that in mind as one of the guiding principles of the FCDO, what would your what learnings can you or do you bring for Pakistan, given some of the challenges that we see from other countries that you have organizations in, that you are working in, and you say, well, I see, just make it up, Egypt and Pakistan have the same water challenges. So we can import the Egyptian learnings into Pakistan. How they deal with the Nile is the way Pakistan should deal with the Indus. What sort of cross-pollination can we hope to see or already seeing that we are not aware of?
Well, on the interesting FCDO comment first. I've got some history on that one, and I could bore you for hours on this one. It wasn't quite as straightforward as Ali was saying. It was actually the merger of two separate departments, for those of you who don't know. So there was one called the Department for International Development, which was the ministry responsible for the development and administration of Britain's development programme globally, and of course the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which was the name is on the tin, basically. It's our diplomatic service and the political side of the UK government. It was then a decision by the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson to merge those two, because we did have, I suppose, portfolios that overlapped. Because when you're talking about development issues and economic issues, there's obviously big political aspects into that. So that it's more of it's again a holistic approach. So it made some sense. But obviously for those individuals like me involved in that, it looks smooth on the outside, but I can assure you internally it was quite challenging. And there's still some way to go. These things aren't easy. I think learning from others, and maybe it does come down to the politics of what's going on. And I think my colleague here touched on the topic that we very rarely talk about, particularly in Pakistan, but that's population. And fundamentally, that's where some of the challenges that we find today, be it either economically or educationally, health-wise, or even on the business side, that's where the problems are. So maybe learning from others and people in the region and other countries in the regions, like, for example, I'll quote Bangladesh, I think, as an example of where they were perhaps 40, 50 years ago. They've thought about what are the big issues that and for them it was population, and the controlling of the population then enabled them to become where they are today, which I actually think Pakistan could have been in a similar position had it made some very difficult decisions. So maybe the crux of your question is, it comes down at the end of the day to political will. If that is there, whatever we do to prop up anything just won't have any impact unless there's the political will to drive the change and see that through. And I think you can learn that from other countries, yes you can, but fundamentally that's what you need.
Population. Maya, that could be, the population could be called a demographic dividend or a population bomb, as to how you particularly you look at the same thing from two angles. HPL and then HBL microfinance, you work you work beyond this, just the coal aspect that you talked about. You work in other areas of Pakistan, where we tend to see that you've taken this population dynamic and made it work for the region, for sustainability. And what we are hearing and what we are seeing and what we talk about, that equation is actually working in our favor. So you've taken that population aspect and engaged the population. Is that a model that we can see? Is that something that we can say, well, it works in a certain part of Pakistan? We can take that particular approach and say, all right, I'm going to transplant that in another part of Pakistan, or is it too peculiar to that particular area of the country?
Ali, I think the success of that particular area has to be the higher level of literacy. And that higher level of literacy dates back to the Aga Khan III, who first established schools there in 1946. And then, of course, the commitment of the late His Highness, the Aga Khan IV, and that emphasis on literacy. And I think that is a lesson that all of Pakistan needs to take. But it's also the right skilling, right? Because if you look at it, and when you look at TCF, for example, when that was set up, they realized soon that half of the student force was going to drop out after the metric at 16 because they needed to enter the workforce. And from there, then there was this sort of spin-off called the Hunar Foundation, which then looked at vocational training. And I think that is a lesson that needs to be carried out across Pakistan, because what we need is a skilled Pakistan. And with this youth bulge, with 70% of our population under the age of 30, what we need is the people with the right skills, right? So you have to now, and I think this is something that, frankly, the entire private sector should focus on, as well as focus their giving on. Because what you need to do is you need to skill people. So please, and everybody is not, so it's vocational training. Yeah. That's what needs to be focused.
Okay.
And it's the skills which are required today. Because you know, you will need the electricians, you will need the plumbers, you will need those sort of, but you will also need the healthcare assistants, you will need the caregivers, you will need the nurses. And this is, I'm talking about the West as well, with their aging populations. So the fact is that then you can also create a steady source of remittance for the country. So this is where sustainability and impact, it all comes into here, and it all comes into play, because that is what needs the focus.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. I'm catching some interesting phrases here. It's about literacy, it's about the right skilling, it's about the population dynamics that you talked about, especially coming from the Bangladesh perspective, Martin. Qasim Saab, when I hear you talk, and correct me if I'm wrong, I hear a lot of we should do that, we will do that. You know, it's a lot of wills and shoulds. So it looks like more like a hope, which can also be translated that you find yourself, think tanks such as SBTI are a bit helpless. Would that be true? Are you just, do I get a sense that you're issuing policy papers and you feel that those policy papers are not being implemented? Or no, that sense of helplessness that I'm thinking is wrong. No, things are happening, things are changing. There are silver linings to the as well. So, what's your, illuminate us on that?
It's a difficult one. Anyway, when we look into on the scale of the problems, perhaps that is what it defines what sort of solutions we are proposing. When Maya was talking about bringing back children to the school or taking them to the vocational centers, I was thinking currently some report says it's 22 million children of school-going age, not in schools. Some report says it's 26 million children who are out of school, and we need to deal with this problem. So what is the way forward, and what the STPI and similar institutions are doing? Being a policy research institute, I feel that it's our job actually to identify what are the possible ways, what are the best practices, like Martin referred to one of the best practices adopted there in Bangladesh. So is Pakistan in position actually to adopt some of those best practices, some of the solutions which have already been tested somewhere else? That is the first part of it. The second part is, and that is the more important part, is where I believe we need to work closely, not just among the research institutes, but also with the businesses, with the government as well. And that's what STPI does, that we try to bring in the businesses, the governments together in one room and provide them a platform where we are discussing different solutions. And the objective there is basically to look at the solutions which we are proposing, are the best practices which we are sharing with the government or with the donor community or with the businesses. Are these replicable in Pakistan based on two yardsticks? One, do we have the capacity to implement those practices, the HR-related issues? And the second, most important is, do we have the financial resources required and the political will, which you talked about, Ali, that the government should have to undertake those solutions? That is the second most. And the third and the very important aspect is the regulatory mechanism, whether it's basically conducive, it's supportive to whatever you wanted to achieve out of those practices, because some of the best practices which we have adopted failed, actually, badly failed. And I will give an example from the COVID-19. There was a couple of packages which were introduced by the government of Pakistan to respond to the COVID back in 2019, 2020. One was the COVID relief package for the COVID stimulus package for agriculture sector. 50 billion rupees were allocated. And only the 35% of the allocation was utilized. Remaining 65% has never been utilized. The reason being, the regulatory mechanism doesn't allow to go money to the provinces, one, and the provinces, if it has reached to the provinces could not come across the terms with the federal government on different issues. So it lied there. And it was laying there for a very long time. And finally, after 2 years, this whole program was abolished. So we need to look into these three main issues. And I would love to hear more from my fellow panelists. One is the HR. This is a big problem when it comes to Pakistan. The second is the financial issues. The third is the regulatory burden. And if we overcome all these three, perhaps we can do wonders.
Martin, of the three aspects that Qasim mentioned right now, financial, the HR aspect, the financial constraint and the regulatory constraints, HR, your interaction with people in Pakistan at different levels, how does that inform you about the HR challenges that Qasim alluded to?
Ooh, there we go. Right. I think, what can I start with on this one? I think undoubtedly there are lots of clever people in Pakistan, without a doubt. Very, very intelligent people here. And I think the HR is less of an issue, to be frank, less of an issue. I think what is missing is the opportunity. I think you've got lots of, potentially you have systems, and certainly the higher education level, I think that's very, very good in Pakistan. And also I think the links that we've created with universities in the UK that's now offering support to higher education institutions here in Pakistan, where you can start your degree for a 3-year degree, you can do most of it in Pakistan, and then have the last year in the UK. That's a significant cost reduction, which I know is only going to benefit maybe the upper echelons, but it's a facility that's there. I think for me, if I can pull it down to, we talk a lot about the private sector, and from a development side, we do know that the biggest impact on reducing poverty and the improving growth does come from the private sector. And I think we are placing a lot on that. But that really is the answer to what's going on. And so then if you can provide jobs for people, then that's where you won't have the brain drain, because there'll be opportunities, people will want to stay. So I think that's where we should also be focusing on there. But also I think it is about the finance. I think that's very, very important, because that is critical. And particularly when you're talking about the business sector, they won't want to take too many risks. We talked about the 3 Ps or 5 Ps. The 4 Ps that I'm aware of are people, planet, purpose and profit. That's my 4 Ps. So I think for some of the answers to some of the problems, and we're trying to address, be it either climate change or the sustainability factors within corporate that we've been talking about, is very much making Pakistan attractive to foreign investment, be that either from the green economy side or from any other side. It's making Pakistan attractive, and that means cutting out the red tape. It's about corporate governance. It's about following the rule of law and those sorts of things. There's going to attract investment, because if you get investment in, then basically I think your private sector and all the issues we've been talking about this morning will in some way be alleviated to some extent.
All right, thank you. Maya, I based my question on the previous comment. That's an easy job that I have. So I just looked at, I heard Martin talk, one of the P's that Martin talked about was profit. And also making Pakistan an attractive investment destination. And that's one role of yours. You're a hardcore business person. You're the chairperson of the HBL Microfinance Bank, which is, you talked about the no coal, which is a big thing. That's a big, and we're talking billions of rupees investment. But at a microfinance level, when you're talking about, as the name suggests, it's microfinance, small investments, small business ventures, very localized business ventures. What sort of sustainability lens you deploy when extending those loans and bringing up those businesses from the ground up, those micro businesses spread around the corners of Pakistan that are not as glamorous as a Karachi or a Lahore or Islamabad?
Ali, I'll tell you one thing with my experience of microfinance. The microfinance customer never defaults. They always pay back. And this is a fact around the globe, that the microfinance customer, the borrower, will always pay back. It'll take them a little longer if they've been through a bad patch. For example, right now, the Lower Punjab area has been, which is your agri belt, and small-holding farmers. They've been severely impacted by the wheat crisis, which happened last year. Then they had to deal with a bit of the cotton crisis as well. And with them, it's very cyclical. So when they didn't have that, the money from their wheat crop, they just couldn't pay back. But you have to stay with them. And that's what it is. They will always pay back. So yes, they'll take longer, 2 years, 3 years. And then as a microfinance bank, what happens is that you have to have a very patient shareholder, because they have to then help you with the capital and support you with the capital. And that's very, very important. So you have to be patient there, because if you're going to expect quick returns, microfinance banks always get labeled as being that, their interest rates are very high. But what happens is you have to understand the level of people, the level of actually HR involvement in the process, because they have to stay with the farmers. They have to, hold their hands, be there for them, and there's a lot of, people involvement. You can have technology. For example, the technology innovations we've done, we are able to reduce the turnaround times from a 10 days, loan application time turnaround to now just under 8 hours. But what still happens is that you have to have the loan officer who has to keep with them, stay with them. So that's where, again, it's the people aspect of it. Yeah.
I'm cognizant of the time. I'd like to open the question and answer session for the floor. If you have any questions from the panelists, please go ahead and learn from their expertise. Any questions from the floor? Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Konemeji. इधर ले आना यार दोस्त.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is how we can add sustainability with having high interest rates, high Kaibor rates in our country, unpredictable Kaibor rates. So banking industry, how can make sustainable life for lower middle class especially? We have more than 60% people in Pakistan who are living below the poverty line at the moment, after the 23% Kaibor in last 3 years. So how we can make the life of common men more sustainable in terms of financial literacy, in terms of financial capacity, what banks are doing and how we can make it happen for next generation, like next 10 years. Right now, people are like, how we can survive in next 6 months or 1 year. So what banks are playing role? So sustainability is pinching me. How we can make it sustainable?
Go ahead.
You want to take this?
I think you're defining sustainability in this particular aspect as financial well-being of the segment of society. And Maya, you can also step in. And the interest rate environment that you're currently talking about has been in this scenario for the last 2 odd years. We are taking, when you talk sustainability, you take a long-term view. We're talking decades here. We are talking about, and as you interestingly heard the panelists talk about, so this is a cyclical thing. The interest rates went up and they're now on the way down. So that's also happening. I think what you heard the panelists talk about in their experience, it's about education. It's about upskilling. It's about the population demographic which is a much more of a social issue. So if you combine these three, they transcend the most cyclical interest rate fluctuations that you see. And I think we need to look at sustainability independent from these cyclical financial movements that affect a certain section of the society, maybe in the urban areas. Here we're talking about water conservation. Here we are talking about, health issues. So I think those are the things that we really need to look at. And then maybe Maya, with
And
that you can
if you talk about it, the kind of focus that we have on now SME and agri, because SME is very much the cornerstone of the economy, and that is what the main driver is. So if you look at the SME lending and the opportunity for small businesses as well, now with the reduced rates also, that there is an impetus. So I think people need to also come forward and take advantage of that. In terms of financial literacy also, we hold these sessions, and we are educating various people everywhere around the country in terms of how to also look at running small businesses, etc. So this is what the banks are doing.
I think we probably, and I'm looking at the panelists, I think we're projecting a certain sense of despondency. I don't think so. We need to be despondent. We need to be alert. We are a huge country of 250 odd million people. We're the 5th largest country in the world. The challenges are huge. Lots of efforts are being undertaken. They're coming together. At times they're not coordinated. But Qasim Sahab, what would you, what example would you give as a positive example of efforts being undertaken in Pakistan at any level, whether you say, hey, that's a good example, that's something good happening, that's something worth emulating on a larger scale, or it should be made aware of, more people should be made aware of that?
So there are several examples where the businesses started working in partnership with the local communities. So what I'm saying is basically that in my earlier submission, in the very first submission, I talked about the 5 Ps. I explained the 3 Ps. There are 2 Ps which I haven't purposely touched upon, because those were, one was the outcome, the other was the way, how you can do it. So partnership is the 4th P. That is very important here. That how you partner with the stakeholders, and not just care about the shareholders in any businesses or in any venture, you name it. And where the entities were able to take care of the interests of the stakeholders, those were very successful. Those have proven to be very successful, even if the cost was initially very high. But ultimately, the communities have adopted those costs, and they started paying for it, whatever the subsidy you started. And so, and that actually brings the peace in the society. And this is something which is more in want in this country at this point of time. We need the peace and stability actually to flourish, not just flourishing in terms of the GDP, but also at the human development level. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Martin, let's assume you are in your next assignment and sitting in Buenos Aires. Yeah, and someone asks you, what good example can you give from what happened in your experience in Pakistan on the sustainability impact aspect? What's a good example that you'll talk about us in Buenos Aires? I just like that word, Buenos Aires.
Well, I would give an example, probably the sort of green bonds that the government have adopted, and certainly since 2021 in the hydroelectric power area, which I think was fantastic. So that's one example. But I'd like to be a little bit controversial if I could be.
Yeah, you must.
I feel as though you're probably all going to throw me out the window. But can I just give an alternative view to the gentleman's question? And I know you were talking about it from the point of view of the banks. And the reason I'm going to be controversial, and it's another elephant in the room, but I think obviously for individuals who are under stress and struggling financially, you could look to a welfare system, some sort of social safety nets. Now, I must admit I don't really know what exists in Pakistan. My hunch is, even my time is here, a lot of those social safety nets are provided by the philanthropists, the charities, the organisations. Now, the question then comes down to taxation, because then you can provide through taxation social safety nets like welfare benefits, housing allowances, you name it, it's all there. I'm not advocating for the welfare state, but it's just an example. And I do appreciate that if people are paying tax, they want to see something in return for that. And of course, if you don't, you're not going to pay it. Obvious. But for me, it's thinking a bit, it's the role of the state in all of this. And that's where, fundamentally, from a welfare point of view, that's where I think some of that should be assisted or provided. But I do recognise it's easier said than done. Sorry to be controversial.
Maya, any other question? Any other question from the panel? Jeez.
Assalamualaikum. My question is that in corporate world, mostly we have heard this word sustainability around business. You have added life in it. So, keeping that in mind, that you are taking that concept toward life broader. That's very, very interesting to me. And I want to continue the earlier question. How governments here and abroad are justifying their role as well as their effort toward sustainability of life standards of common people. People living below poverty are very common. They need education, health, security. So mostly how they are connecting, they are justified in their efforts, or you can advise them something more towards that. Thanks.
Martin, I'd like you to take a view on that, because we're talking governments. It's not just the government of Pakistan, but I think governments across the world. So we could take and then we can turn to Qasim Saab for that.
I think it probably goes back to my earlier comments about polarization and people not thinking about the bigger picture. Because I think, as Sir David Attenborough said, the world is changing. We've got to change with it, or else we're going to have problems if we don't go. And I think it's just a recognition. Yes, okay, we've talked about policies that are very much, I suppose, people or country specific. But I think if we don't actually think more globally and address some of these fundamental issues, that are going to affect all of us without a doubt. I mean, I've seen it flooding in my home country as well, not just flooding in Sindh. The world is changing and it's going to impact everybody. The cost of inaction report, if I may highlight that just very briefly, which I think this is where it was picked up, where I made reference to this during a speech that I gave a week or so ago about climate change and the impact on the seas and things. That if we actually don't address some of these issues, there's a report called we actually helped fund it, Bridging Pakistan's Adaptation Financing Gap. So just of the cost of inaction to highlight the potential damage of climate inaction just in Pakistan, and I'm sorry to highlight just Pakistan, but I think this is probably relevant if you want to talk about any country, but in the cost here, the projected total cost of climate inaction here is estimated to be $250 billion by 2030 and a 1.2 trillion by 2050, equivalent to losses to priority sectors of the GDP of around 30% in those peak years. And for example, even by 2030, drought and extreme heat are forecast to cause about an 8% loss in agricultural crops, GDP, per year. And I know you comment about the agrarian economy, that does put it at serious risks. So, but as I say, I'm quoting where we feel Pakistan is, but I think we could put any country there and with some of these facts, with some of these areas of concern. So I think we've just got to start thinking more internationally and globally, and I think that's where you get the multilateral development banks, be it Asia in this part of the world, the IMF, the World Bank, even the Caribbean Development Bank. They're the people with the big financing, and they're wanting to do more on these sorts of activities. So I think it's on governments like mine to work more closely with those international development partners, not just the banks, but the financial institutions, to actually say, actually, it's a bigger picture issue here, and we need to do more, because we are not, there are too many people at risk from this. That's the bottom line. You're quite right to highlight that.
From the international to the local, Qasim Saab, what would you say to the gentleman's question on that?
I would stick to what Martin has said. He has explained it actually very well.
Okay. Ma'am.
So my question is around business strategy, really, and it's primarily to Maya. A lot of smaller companies or even mid-sized companies that I work with, they're becoming aware of sustainability. It's the buzzword. There's a lot of regulation around it also. But they believe that the approach to sustainability should be, okay, CSR. You know, we have this little portion and we're going to go and donate to these 5 companies. Now, Maya, you have given examples which I believe are not, they're not based on this, I would say, isolationary strategy. So I'd like you to comment on that. How do you actually integrate sustainability into business strategy and not keep it in a separate compartment just as CSR?
Thank you, Nosheen, because this also, usually we box this into ESG, which is environmental and social governance. Sustainability should be at the core of every business. It should really be from the board to the management to every single person. And it is about the right way of doing business. What we have done in our organization is that we have a cross-functional forum. So all the business heads are on it. The HR person is there, the operations is on it. So it's every single encompassing, because if you look at your own emissions, you're talking about as a bank what you're doing, and your own emissions, you have your business, and you have your people. So it's your people strategy, it's what you are standing for. So for example, you look at even to the fact that microfinance bank, as well as HBL, we don't do any gold lending. That's part of our sustainability strategy. If you look at the other microfinance banks, they are lending against gold. We don't lend against gold. That's one way of doing responsible business. If you are, so it's literally when you look at the effort on the agribusiness, or you're looking at the SME, and you have to have that room and that risk and that capacity, right? So it's about taking that risk of doing the business in those areas where you may know that you're going to, have bad loans, or you're going to have to be a little more patient.
Yeah.
But that's about it again. So it's at everything that you do, and it's about building people at the end of the day and building capacity.
All right. Thank you for that answer and for the question, ma'am. I think with this, they just showed me a placard that the time is up. I'd like to thank the participants. The topic that we had in this panel, I think, is of existential importance for a country as challenged, as large, and with such multifaceted problems as Pakistan and challenges. I think what the discussion took place right now showed us very clearly what the challenges are. They are the population bomb, and the lack of political will, if I were to take that. But there are also some solutions. We have heard about the upskilling part. We have heard about the literacy part. And those things, when implemented, can come up with, because they come up with solutions. All solutions will not come from the government. I think we have examples in certain parts of Pakistan, the corporate entities, where the social safety networks that Martin alluded to, which are unique to Pakistan in some respects, where the breadth and scope have really stepped in. All in all, I think impact and sustainability and how it's taken into account into investment, business and life, I think is going to drive the agenda for Pakistan in the 21st century. Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Respected speakers, thank you for such an informative session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Our next session, Crime Fiction and the Pursuit of Justice, begins at 12:15. Thank you. Wishing you a pleasant day ahead.